Tonight's big story is about homelessness and our housing crisis, not in Portland, but hours away in a small community along Oregon's coast. In fact, this headline caught our eye today. Oregon coastal city limits number of meals churches can feed homeless. Shout out to OPB on that one. So here's the deal. You know, we talk a lot about Portland's housing crisis, but this story tonight and that one from OPB is proof that this issue is way bigger than any single solitary city. It is a regional problem. It is a West Coast problem. And a lot of experts believe homelessness is rising or will soon rise in most cities nationwide, including smaller ones. And sometimes when that happens, you find communities caught off guard by this problem taking measures like this. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's back up a little bit. These photos are a good scene setter. These come from staff at St. Timothy's Episcopal Church in Brookings, Oregon. Brookings is near the California-Oregon border, so we're talking southern coast. This church has fed their city's poor for decades. And when COVID hit, they saw the need skyrocket. So, along with a handful of other local churches, they teamed up to offer one free meal every day. Each church took different days of the week. People bounced from church to church, day to day, but at least they got to eat. Well, Father Bernie Lindley, who you'll hear from in a minute, says eventually, other churches started to struggle. They couldn't keep up with the demand. People got scared to be around strangers during the pandemic, you name it. So as other churches dropped out, he and St. Timothy's picked up the slack until eventually, and this is key, that one little church, St. Timothy's, started offering one meal a day for anywhere between 4 and 6 days per week, up to 6 days per week. This happened around lunchtime. Lindley says anywhere from 50 to 70 people showed up. And soon, sweet little St. Timothy's basically just thought, they're doing a great service. Someone has to feed the homeless. Their neighbors had a very different take. In fact, here's video of neighbors testifying to the Brookings City Council back in June.
I'm here today because I don't feel safe in my house. This is a public health concern. It's a safety concern for the public. We're not trying to solve the nation's crisis of homelessness here in Brookings, Oregon.
But I've had things stolen from my backyard. I had to put fences up. It's the drug use is what makes it uneasy. They're selling drugs down there, they're trading drugs, whatever they're doing, but I literally have to go on a walk every night just to make sure, no one's going to be coming up into my property.
Some of the things I've listened to in this meeting, Love That Neighbor was one of the things that I thought most interesting, especially since I took a petition around the neighborhood of St. Timothy's Church, and about 90% of them were against what's going on at St. Timothy's Church. So I don't know how that falls into play with Love Thy Neighbor.
Okay, so we do want to be clear. Other neighbors spoke to the council that day in favor of the church's efforts. We chose the sound bites that we chose just now because the city council this week apparently took these concerns very seriously. And on Tuesday, the city council voted unanimously to pass a new ordinance in Brookings. Now, churches in that city can only offer food to homeless people 2 days per week, 2 days per church. Pick your days. The legal argument was that St. Timothy's was feeding people so much, it was basically a restaurant. And under city code, restaurants cannot operate in residential zones. So the city sees this ordinance as a compromise. You can feed the homeless, you can do it, just 2 days per week. 2. Instead of St. Timothy's recent routine of 4 days per week, they'd come down a little bit from 6. So now back to Father Bernie Lindley of St. Timothy's, because as you can imagine, he, like those neighbors, has some thoughts.
How do you tell a church that they can't feed people? Isn't that what churches are supposed to do? In our diocese, in the Episcopal Diocese of Oregon, our churches feed people. That's instrumental in the way that we serve God and serve God's people.
So here's the deal. Father Lindley says his church is doing everything it can to work with neighbors and with the city, who, by the way, we've reached out to. Neighbors have turned us down for interviews. They're a little nervous with how big this has become. And as far as the city is concerned, we left a message at City Hall, which turns out is closed on Fridays. And we got in touch with the city manager, but we haven't been able to interview anyone behind these decisions yet. If that changes, we'll absolutely let you know. But in the meantime, Father Lindley is polite, but he's defiant. He's not cutting his service back to 2 days a week, he says. If the city wants to fine him or arrest him, he says go for it. He told me he's prepared to sue. His reason? The homeless population in Brookings, he says, is growing. More than 150 people by his estimation. And his small town, like a lot of American small towns, is not prepared for this crisis coming their way from larger cities, especially like San Francisco, Seattle, and Portland.
We're seeing like the overflow, I guess. People are coming into the rural areas now. And one of the concerns about that people share, people in the community, they say, well, you're going to turn Brookings into another Portland, and there's going to be all these people living alongside the freeway in tents, and it's going to be a disaster. And unfortunately, that is the consequence of the high cost of housing, all the instability that was created by the pandemic, and the fact that we have very little in the way of mental health services or addiction services. You know, where inpatient treatment centers are not easy to come by.
We'll keep our eye on Brookings.